In this tutorial, we're going to see how easy it is to put a new model into ModelDB. Before we start, let's look at a typical model in ModelDB. It has a name, a unique accession number, a brief description, references of papers that describe or use the model, a list of facts that include what kind of model it is, what kind of cells are in it, the ion channels, receptors, and transmitters that are represented in it, the simulation environment it was written for, the name of the person who implemented the model, and last but not least, the files that contain the model's source code and a README file. So that's what a typical entry in ModelDB looks like. Now let's make a new one. The model we're going to submit comes from one of Will Rawls' papers about synaptic integration. We don't have his original code, but Rawls' model description was so clear that it's easy to replicate with Neuron. This directory contains everything we need to run the model, all of the source code that specifies the biological properties that are represented, plus the instrumentation for stimulating the model and collecting results, and the control and user interface for running simulations and plotting graphs. There's also a README text file, which contains a citation of the paper, the name of the implementer, and whom to contact if you have questions, and a brief verbal description of the model and how to use it. Let's enter this model into ModelDB. First, we have to make a zip file that contains the model source code and the README file. I've already zipped up the folder that contains this stuff. Here we see just what the zip file contains. Notice that it has only the source code and the README file. These should be in plain text so they can be viewed with any web browser. There is no need to include any compiled files, such as the neuronmech.dll that you get from compiling mod files with makeneuron.dll. Now that we have the zip file, let's go to ModelDB's home page. We click on Submit a New Model Entry. Here's the top of the model submission form. These instructions make it seem like you should try to do everything all at once, but it's easier to do this in several steps. So start by entering just enough information so you can upload the zip file, then come back later to fill out the rest of this page. Enter your email address, then browse to the zip file that contains the model's source code and README file. Next, click on the zip file, then on the Open button. Finally, type the read-write access code. When you first create a new model entry, it's private. Nobody can see it without a password. The access code is a password that lets you return to this model entry and revise it. Okay, we've entered our email address, specified the zip file to upload, and specified the access code. It's time to click on the Submit button. After a short pause, ModelDB shows us this page, which contains a link that will take us right back to the model. There's the model's accession number. There's the password we specified. ModelDB will also email us this information, but I always write down the accession number and password just to be sure I have them. Next, we need to review our private model entry. So click on this link, and we can see that it has a lot of blanks. To fill these in, click on the Edit button, and up comes the Edit Model page. Let's give this model entry a descriptive name. Let's call it Effects of Synaptic Location and Timing on Synaptic Integration. Also, let's provide a brief description of the model, the research question it was used to address, and a citation of the paper that described it. So click in the Notes field. I could start typing right away, but for this example, I'll just copy and paste some stuff from the README text file. Let's skip over this Edit Model Paper Links item. ModelDB's curator will take care of this for us. Now it's time to move down the page and specify the properties of the model. If this were a model of a particular kind of cell, we'd scroll through this list to see if we could find it. But this is a model of neurons in general, and that's not in this list. So let's just type simplified generalized neuron. It doesn't involve any particular neurotransmitters, so let's skip those. It doesn't have any receptors, and it doesn't have any particular ionic current. It just has a non-specific leak. No gap junctions either. So we'll leave those fields empty. Farther down, we finally run into something that requires action. What kind of a model is this? Its primary focus is on dendritic function, so we click on Dendrite. What concepts are pertinent to this model? There are three: electrotonus, simplified models, and synaptic integration. To select these, hold down the Control key and click the mouse on each item. Of course, Mac users have to hold down the Command key. The last things to specify are the programming language or simulator software that was used, the person or persons who implemented this model, and the relevant brain region or organism. Since this is a completely theoretical, generalized model, the brain region and organism is unknown. And that's it. Time to go to the top of the page and click on Save Description. ModelDB saves what we entered and shows us what the model entry looks like now. Looks pretty good. Let's test it by clicking on the Download Zip File button and make sure that what we get is what we uploaded. So now we have done what we can with this model entry. It's time for the ModelDB curator to have a turn. If we think of something that needs to be changed, we can always come back to it and revise it. If nothing needs changing, we ask the ModelDB curator to make it public by clicking on this Request to Make Public button. Thank you for taking this tutorial, and thank you for your interest in ModelDB.